I'm going to talk you through how the RMIT PhD is structured for practitioners who undertake their PhD studies by working through projects situated in their practice. The model is useful in terms of understanding also the difference between what might be called a project PhD, in which the PhD proceeds through the vehicle of a single project, as compared with a practice-based PhD, which might proceed through an investigation and reflection upon a series of projects contained within a practice itself. Usually these PhDs commence with a considerable body of work already completed within the discipline area, and usually those practitioners, through their body of work, have achieved some level of recognition from their peers that the work that they have been doing in some ways contributes to building that discipline in one way or another. The purpose of the PhD is to then bring to the surface things that usually remain implicit, knowledge which remains implicit both in terms of the methodologies and ways of working of a creative practice and also about the nature of creative practice itself. So, to this end, I might begin with a description of the practice as a series of already existing projects that have taken place over a period of time and that come together under what you might call the umbrella of that practice. And of course you get to a certain point in time which is now, and you can understand that there are projects that are sort of semi-complete, and of course there's also projects that are already to some extent being anticipated into the future. What happens in a practice-based PhD is that if the PhD commences at this point here, and this is time moving forward, we can indicate that a little better here, perhaps, by saying, look, the timeline doesn't stop here, but it actually keeps extending forward. We ask the practitioners to begin by thinking back through previous projects and looking for what you might call the urge that has driven the development of certain projects and might continue to do so into the future. And usually what happens is that several strands of investigation begin to emerge through a practice that link certain projects and suggest certain trajectories. Sometimes, of course, in working through these, what's discovered is actually what you might call a dead end. It doesn't go anywhere. And we invite those practitioners to begin to explore those and to explain those back to us through the process of the PhD. PhDs for these kinds of practitioners generally take about 3 years, and it's structured around two what we call PRS events, practice research symposia, that occur each year. So we could begin to indicate those through this diagram as well, by saying that twice a year there's going to be that's PRS 1, and you can imagine then that there will end up being six of these in the course of the PhD study. It's critical to understand that when we talk about the course of the PhD study, what we mean effectively is that this creative practice will continue as a practice. So projects will continue to be done as the practice moves through this trajectory, and they will also become the subjects and the material of the PhD itself. And so these kinds of trajectories that we're tracing out will be reformed and repeated several times, usually through that, until we get to a certain point, which is what you might call the completion point of the PhD. And what people find is that as they move on in this structure, certain things will begin to emerge. So certain projects, certain moments will begin to stand out as having been critical in the formation of the practice and in understanding how that practice works in a way that had not been understood prior to the PhD being commenced. And you might call this a moment of recognition, where the practitioner is able to look back and is able to recognise these key moments and to explicate what was going on at those points and what caused those shifts and changes to happen in the practice. And the second major component is not only the ability to recognise and be able to describe those points, but then to be able to explicate them and explain them out to a broader disciplinary audience. And it's this combination of recognition and explication that's critical to the way this is structured. Usually in PRS1, the first of the PRS events, we invite our practitioners to provide us an overview and a survey of the back catalogue of work. So to be able to describe, in effect, what the practice had done up until this point in time. From that moment on, it becomes more a question of how practitioners begin to trace out these important ideas about what has driven what I mentioned before, what I described before as the urge of the practice. And just to explain that term a little more, I use the term urge to try and explain this is the inexplicable thing that causes a practitioner to continue exploring in a certain direction. And this is critical, it would seem, to all creative practices, that there is some fundamental underlying drive which moves them through projects and retrospectively, in a way, connects one project to another in a manner that you might describe as a familial resemblance. In other words, the projects appear as a set in retrospect, and the sorts of lines that we've been drawing here become then identifiable in linking them. And the purpose of this kind of research is to really begin to make those urges explicable. What we also talk about, and this comes from one of our previous graduates, Jo Vandenberg from Belgium, is that coupled with this idea of the urge is what you might describe as a field of fascinations. What is it that draws you and as a creative practitioner and ignites some sense and ability to expand open, to explore further that urge in each project? In other words, what are the motifs, the objects, the ideas, the concepts, the opportunities, the observations? What are, in terms of, if you imagine these as a field of fascinations which collect around each project, to be able to explain how that relationship between fascinations, urges, and then the outworking of the projects themselves work. This is really what we're trying to uncover through our practice-based PhDs. Another important element to work through in relation to this diagram is concepts of dynamic reflection, and this I'll cover in a separate tutorial and on a second video. So I'll leave that for now as some kind of overview of the structure and nature of our practice-based PhD.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.